Mommy, please don't leave me.
Stay here. I'll be right back.
It was a cold, silent night when a mother left her little girl in the forest. The sound of the wind was the only thing that could be heard. The girl, only 6 years old, could not see the trees, but she could hear the rustling leaves around her. Her mother's voice faded away, and the girl was left alone in the dark, blind and scared. Her mother had promised to come back, but the girl didn't know that this would be the last time she would ever hear her voice. The little girl, Sarah, had been born blind. Her mother, Rachel, never wanted a blind child. She had dreams of a perfect family, but Sarah's condition made everything harder. Rachel didn't know how to deal with it. She couldn't take the constant worry, the extra care that Sarah needed. One night, in a moment of complete hopelessness, she made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. It wasn't a planned thing. Rachel didn't think it through, she just acted. She drove far into the forest, parked the car by the side of the road, and without saying a word, she pushed Sarah out of the car. "Stay here," she said. "I'll be right back." But Rachel didn't return. For hours, Sarah sat alone. The forest was dark, colder than she had ever felt. She tried to call out for her mother, but no one answered. Her hands reached out into the darkness, but all she touched were cold, rough branches. She tried to stand up, but stumbled, falling into the soft, wet ground. She was too scared to move, too scared to cry. Sarah couldn't understand why her mother had left her. She didn't know where she had gone or if she was coming back. She had always been taught to trust her mother, but now, alone in the forest, that trust seemed to break into pieces. As the night wore on, Sarah's fear began to grow. She could hear strange sounds in the distance, animals, rustling leaves, and the occasional snap of twigs underfoot. She clung to the hope that her mother would come back, but with each passing minute, that hope slowly faded away. Rachel had no idea how much pain she had caused her daughter. She drove back home, unable to face what she had just done. She convinced herself it was for the best. "I can't keep taking care of her," Rachel told herself. "She'll be better off without me." Sarah spent the night in the forest. She tried to sleep, but it was hard with the cold biting at her skin. The next morning, she was still alone, no sign of her mother. Her legs were weak from sitting so long, and she felt hungry and thirsty. She finally stood up, trying to find her way through the trees. For days, Sarah wandered through the forest, hoping for someone to help her. She stumbled over rocks, tripped over tree roots, and cried herself to sleep every night. The days blurred together, and Sarah lost track of time. She couldn't see the sun or the moon, but she could feel the change in the air. The cold nights and warm days began to blend in her mind. She didn't know how long she had been there, but it felt like forever. Meanwhile, back home, Rachel went on with her life. She didn't talk about Sarah, and she didn't tell anyone what had happened. She tried to forget, but deep down, guilt started eating at her. It was hard to enjoy anything. Every time she saw a mother with her child, a wave of regret washed over her. Months passed. Rachel moved on with her life, but the emptiness of what she had done stayed with her. She tried to bury it, but it never went away. Every time she saw a girl around Sarah's age, she felt the sharp sting of what she had done. As the years went by, Sarah's life in the forest grew harder. She learned to survive. She became good at listening to the sounds of the forest, identifying the different animals by their calls and the way they moved. She learned to find water by following the sound of flowing streams, and she learned to find food by following her sense of smell. But the loneliness never left her. And through it all, Sarah never stopped thinking about her mother. She had long given up hope of seeing her again, but she still wondered why her mother had done what she did. Sarah's life took a surprising turn one winter when she stumbled into a small town on the edge of the forest. A kind woman found her, battered and weak from years of living alone in the wild. The woman brought her to a hospital where Sarah was treated for malnutrition and dehydration. It was the first time she had ever been taken care of since the day her mother abandoned her. The town didn't know where Sarah had come from. She couldn't remember her last name, her home, or anything from her past. But something about her felt familiar. People in the town noticed that she looked like a missing child who had been on the news years ago, a little girl who had disappeared from a nearby town when she was just 6 years old. It didn't take long for Rachel to hear the news. She was sitting at home scrolling through her phone when she saw a story about a blind girl who had been found in the woods. The girl was being treated at a local hospital, and the report mentioned her possible identity. Rachel froze. She stared at the screen, her hands trembling. She had never expected to hear anything about Sarah again. But there it was, the truth staring back at her. Rachel went to the hospital, her heart racing. She didn't know what she would say to Sarah, what she would do, but she had to see her. When she entered the room, Sarah was sitting in a chair by the window, her face turned toward the sunlight. Sarah looked up as Rachel approached. She didn't recognize her at first, but there was something in Rachel's eyes that Sarah had never forgotten. Her mother. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room was filled with silence. Finally, Rachel broke the stillness. "Sarah!" she whispered, her voice shaky. "I'm so sorry." Sarah didn't say anything. She just looked at her mother, her expression unreadable. The years in the forest had changed her. She was no longer the little girl who had once trusted her mother completely. But deep down, Sarah felt something stir, a mix of anger, confusion, and the faintest trace of hope. Rachel stayed by Sarah's side, trying to explain everything, but words felt useless. The damage had been done. Years of abandonment, loneliness, and survival in the forest couldn't be erased by a few words. But one thing was certain. Rachel regretted what she had done. And she would spend the rest of her life trying to make up for it. As Rachel spent more time with Sarah at the hospital, she realized just how much damage her actions had caused. It wasn't just the years of separation. It was the emotional scars that would take much longer to heal. Sarah was quiet, often lost in her thoughts, and Rachel could see that the years of being abandoned in the woods had shaped her in ways she couldn't fix with a simple apology. Rachel tried to help Sarah reconnect with the world, teaching her how to navigate life again, but it wasn't easy. Sarah had grown used to living alone, relying only on her own instincts. Her blindness didn't bother her as much as it used to. In the forest, it had become part of her, a survival tool she'd learned to depend on. But now, in a world filled with strange sounds and unfamiliar faces, Sarah felt like an outsider. It was a slow process, but Sarah began to trust Rachel again, though not without hesitation. They spent time together, walking around the small town, learning how to communicate without words. Rachel would guide Sarah, helping her navigate through the busy streets, offering her support when she stumbled. Sarah, for the first time in years, felt a strange sense of comfort from her presence, but the pain of her abandonment lingered in her heart. Rachel's guilt was overwhelming. She couldn't help but replay the day she left Sarah in the forest over and over in her mind. The look on Sarah's face, the way she had pleaded for her to stay, echoed in Rachel's mind. She had tried to convince herself that Sarah would be fine, that she'd be better off without her, but now that she was here, looking into her daughter's eyes, Rachel saw how deeply she had hurt her. One evening, as they sat together in a small park near the hospital, Rachel turned to Sarah. "I wish I could take back everything I've done," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I made a terrible mistake, Sarah. I thought I was doing what was best, but I was wrong. I can't undo it, but I promise I'll never leave you again. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the pain I caused." Sarah listened in silence. She didn't know how to respond. The words felt empty, and yet part of her wanted to believe her mother. She wanted to believe that she hadn't been abandoned for good, that maybe there was still hope for their relationship. But the years of pain and loneliness were hard to forget. After a long pause, Sarah finally spoke, her voice calm but distant. "You can't undo what's been done, Mum. You can't fix what happened in the forest, and you can't erase the years I spent alone. But maybe we can try to move forward." Rachel nodded, grateful for Sarah's willingness to even try. It wouldn't be easy, but they had to take it one step at a time. The months passed, and slowly Sarah began to adjust to life outside the forest. She started working with a counselor to deal with the trauma she had experienced. It was difficult for her to trust people, and even harder to trust her mother again, but little by little she started opening up. She even began to smile again, something Rachel hadn't seen in years. But the scars remained. Sarah struggled with the feelings of abandonment, the loneliness that had followed her for so long. It was something Rachel could never fully fix. She had to come to terms with the fact that Sarah's trust in her could never be fully restored. No matter how hard she tried, she could never undo the damage she had done. As the years went by, Rachel tried her best to support Sarah. She helped her enroll in a local school for the blind, where Sarah learnt to read Braille and improve her independence. It was a new beginning for Sarah, one that Rachel hoped would help her daughter move on from the past. But Sarah still carried the weight of her abandonment. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she would reflect on the years she had spent in the forest. She remembered the cold nights, the hunger, the fear, but she also remembered how strong she had become, how she had learned to survive on her own. That strength was part of her now, something she would never let go of, no matter how much her mother regretted her actions. One day, while they were sitting in a park, Sarah turned to Rachel and said something that Rachel had been waiting to hear for years. "I don't hate you, Mum," Sarah said, her voice steady, "but I need you to understand that I'm not the same person I was before. I've changed, and I don't think I can ever fully forget what happened. But I'm trying to move on." Rachel's heart swelled with emotion. She knew it wouldn't be easy, and she knew there would always be a part of Sarah that would carry the pain of the past. But hearing her daughter say those words gave Rachel hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild their relationship. It would take time, but Rachel was willing to do whatever it took. As the years continued to pass, Sarah and Rachel's relationship began to heal. It wasn't perfect, and it would never be the same as it once had been, but it was a start. Rachel continued to support Sarah, offering her love and encouragement even when Sarah pulled away. And Sarah, for her part, began to let go of the anger that had held her back for so long. They never talked about the forest again, and Rachel never asked Sarah to forgive her. She knew that forgiveness couldn't be forced, and that Sarah had to come to it on her own terms. But slowly, over time, the bond between mother and daughter began to grow stronger. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when it felt like it might break again, but Rachel never gave up. She knew that the road to redemption was long, and she was willing to walk it, no matter how difficult it was. Years passed, and Sarah grew into a young woman. She had learned to navigate the world with the same strength that had carried her through the forest. Her blindness didn't define her anymore. It was just a part of who she was. She had developed a strong sense of independence, and though her relationship with Rachel was still fragile, it was growing. Rachel had never stopped trying to make things right. She would visit Sarah often, bringing her little gifts, books, or just spending time with her. They would talk about anything and everything, though there were still moments of silence between them. Moments when the weight of the past seemed too heavy to carry. One day, Rachel invited Sarah to lunch. They sat together in a small, cozy restaurant in the town. The sun was shining through the window, casting a warm light across the table. For the first time in a long while, they shared a comfortable silence. Rachel watched Sarah, studying the way she had grown. She was no longer the little girl left alone in the forest. Sarah had become strong, resilient, and independent, and Rachel couldn't help but feel proud. "I'm glad you're here," Rachel said softly. "I know I've messed up, but I want you to know that I'll never stop trying to make it right." Sarah smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I know, Mum. I can see that. I know you regret what happened, but sometimes there's only so much that can be fixed." Rachel nodded. "I understand, and I know that I can't erase what I did, but I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere." Sarah didn't answer right away. She took a deep breath, as if gathering her thoughts. "I don't need you to fix everything. I just need you to be here, for me. And not just when it's convenient, but always. I need to know that I'm not alone." Rachel felt tears well up in her eyes. She reached across the table and took Sarah's hand, holding it tightly. "I will be here. I promise. You're not alone anymore." The years that followed were still difficult. There were moments when Sarah would pull away, moments when the old wounds of the past resurfaced, but they were fewer and farther between. Rachel understood now that healing wasn't a straight line. It was a journey, and they were on it together, even if the road was rocky at times. Sarah eventually found her own path in life. She worked as a counsellor for children with disabilities, helping them find their way in the world just as she had. She found fulfillment in helping others, in showing them that they could be strong, just as she had been. Rachel continued to support Sarah from the sidelines, proud of the woman she had become. She watched from a distance, knowing that she could never fully make up for the past, but she was okay with that. She had learned that redemption wasn't about perfection. It was about trying, every day, to be better than the day before.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel for more.